Don't come near me, sir. I am not clean.
The main street of Silver Creek was empty at sundown, just the way Marcus preferred it. He'd ridden into this small Colorado town 3 months ago with nothing but his horse, his saddle, and the weight of secrets that had followed him from Texas. At 35, he was a man who'd learned to keep his distance from people, from feelings, from anything that might tether him to one place. The livery stable where he worked suited him fine. Horses didn't ask questions. They didn't judge. They didn't leave you broken. He had been engaged once, years ago, to a girl named Sarah who embodied everything society said was pure and good. She'd been innocent, untouched, everything a man was supposed to want. But innocence, he'd learned, could be fragile. It could shatter. And when it did, it took him with it. That relationship had ended when Sarah married his older brother, a man with more money and less complicated emotions. Since then, Marcus had avoided entanglement. He'd kept his distance from the saloon girls, the school teachers, the women who looked at him with curiosity or interest. He was content being alone, or so he told himself. Then Rebecca arrived on the evening stage. She came to Silver Creek as a governess, hired by the wealthiest family in the territory to educate their 3 children. At first, Marcus barely noticed her. She was just another woman passing through, another person with her own life and complications. But then one evening, he saw her walking alone near the edge of town, and something about her solitary grace caught his attention. Over the following weeks, they began to encounter each other. At the general store, on the road out of town, in the evening, when she'd walk to clear her mind, and he'd find himself walking the same paths. These weren't planned meetings, but they had a rhythm to them, the kind of rhythm that develops when 2 people are unconsciously drawn to each other. Marcus learned that Rebecca was 28 years old, educated in Boston, a woman who'd chosen independence over marriage, career over security. She was beautiful in an unconventional way. Her intelligence showed in her eyes, her confidence in her bearing. She didn't simper or flirt or play the games other women played. She simply existed as herself, fully formed and complete. One evening, while helping her carry books back to the house where she stayed, Marcus asked a question that had been circling his mind for weeks. "Why did you never marry?" Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. "Because marriage would mean becoming someone's possession. I've spent my life learning to think for myself, to make my own choices. I wasn't willing to surrender that. And now," Marcus asked, "now I'm 35, she said with a slight smile. "I've realized that surrender isn't the same as compromise, that there's a difference between losing yourself in someone and building something with someone." The first time Marcus kissed her was on a night when snow had just begun to fall, the kind of snow that makes the world feel new and possible. She responded to his kiss with a depth of feeling that surprised them both. When he pulled away, breathless, she was looking at him with those intelligent eyes. "I need to tell you something," she said, "before this goes any further." "All right," Marcus said, though something in him tensed with anticipation. They went back to the small room she rented, the one above the milliner's shop. She made tea, and they sat across from each other, and Rebecca began to speak. "I'm not pure," she said quietly. "I know what society says a woman should be. I know what men like you are supposed to expect. And I'm not that. I've lived. I've loved. I've made choices that weren't always respectable." Marcus felt his heart rate increase. "What are you telling me?" "I'm telling you the truth," Rebecca said. 7 years ago, I was in love with a man. He was an artist, brilliant and passionate, and entirely unsuitable by everyone's standards. We lived together for 2 years. We had a relationship, a full relationship, not just a courtship. And then his family made him an ultimatum, and he chose him over me. She paused, and Marcus watched her work through the pain of that old wound. After he left, I came west. I became a teacher. I built a life for myself. I've had other relationships. Nothing is serious. But I've lived as a woman with agency and desire, not as someone waiting to be chosen. She looked at him directly. "If that's a problem for you, you need to tell me now." Marcus found himself standing, needing to move, needing to think. He walked to the window and looked out at the snow falling on Silver Creek. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked finally. Because I don't lie, Rebecca said. And because if we're going to be together, if we're going to build something real, it has to be on the foundation of truth, not on pretense or the illusion that I'm something I'm not. You realize what people will say, Marcus said, if they find out. Yes, Rebecca said. I realize. And I'm telling you anyway because I believe that what I've done, what I've experienced, doesn't make me less worthy of love. It makes me more aware of what real love actually is. Marcus turned to face her. He thought about Sarah, about purity and innocence, and how little it had actually meant when it mattered. He thought about the years he'd spent alone, thinking that distance was safety, that isolation was peace. And he thought about what it would mean to choose someone fully aware of who they were, to build something with honesty as a foundation. I don't care what people will say, he said finally. I care what you're saying. I care who you are. Even knowing what I've done, especially knowing what you've done, Marcus said. You're not damaged goods. Rebecca, you're a woman who's loved fully and lived completely. That's not a flaw. That's extraordinary. He moved toward her, and when he kissed her this time, it was different. It was a promise. Not a promise he could fix her or save her. She didn't need either. But a promise that he saw her completely and chose her anyway. More than that, he chose her because of what she was, not in spite of it. 3 weeks later, on a night when the snow was falling so thickly that the whole world seemed wrapped in white, Rebecca came to his room at the boarding house. She knocked softly, and when he opened the door, she was standing there in nothing but a simple cotton shift, her hair down around her shoulders, her expression somewhere between fear and certainty. I want you to understand something, she said. This body has loved before. This heart is broken and healed and opened again. I'm not the innocent girl that society thinks a woman should be on her wedding night. But I'm here, fully myself, and I'm choosing you. Not because you've claimed me or won me, but because I want to. Marcus stepped aside, and she entered his room, entered his life, entered the space he kept closed off for so long. When she let the shift drop to the floor, when she stood before him naked and unashamed, Marcus's heart didn't beat faster with conquest or triumph. It stilled. It became quiet and certain and full of something that transcended passion. It became full of grace. He loved her slowly, reverently, aware that what was happening between them was sacred, not because of virginity or purity, but because of honesty, because she was trusting him with the complete truth of who she was, and he was honoring that trust by meeting her with equal honesty. Afterward, they lay together in the darkness, and Rebecca spoke softly. Are you sorry? She asked. Now that you know everything? Never, Marcus said. You're the most real thing that's ever happened to me. You're the most beautiful thing I've ever known. They married 3 months later, a quiet ceremony that the town gossiped about endlessly. Some people condemned Rebecca as unsuitable. Others gossiped about her past. But Marcus didn't care. He'd found something more valuable than reputation or approval. He'd found a woman who knew herself completely and was willing to share that self with him. They lived in Silver Creek for 43 years. Rebecca continued to teach, and together they raised 5 children, 3 of their own and 2 adopted from families in the surrounding area. Marcus eventually bought a small ranch outside of town, and Rebecca wrote books about education and women's independence that were published in Boston and New York. Their children knew their mother's story. She'd told them when they were old enough to understand, about the artists she'd loved, about the choices she'd made, about the importance of living authentically. She'd taught them that purity was far less important than integrity, that a woman's value wasn't determined by her virginity, but by the content of her character. 20 years after they married, when Marcus was 55 and Rebecca was 53, a young couple came to their home asking for advice. The woman had been married before, had a child from a previous relationship. The man was from a traditional family who disapproved of the match. Rebecca invited them in and told them her story. By the end, the young woman was crying, grateful for the knowledge that she didn't have to be ashamed of her past, that she could build a future on the foundation of truth. Marcus and Rebecca became known throughout Colorado as people who understood something that society was only beginning to learn, that wholeness was more valuable than purity, that a person who lived fully was more capable of love than someone who had never been tested, that the most sacred relationship was one built on complete honesty. The final letter Marcus wrote to Rebecca, years later when they were both old and their love had deepened into something that transcended passion, contained this truth. You arrived in my life a woman who had already lived, already loved, already broken and healed. You showed me that purity was a cage and authenticity was freedom. When you let the cloth drop, when you stood before me without shame or pretense, my heart didn't merely beat faster. It stilled, and in that stillness, I understood everything that mattered. Thank you for being fully yourself. Thank you for asking me to be the same. The story of Marcus and Rebecca, the cowboy and the governess, the man who thought he wanted innocence and found himself transformed by honesty, became a legend in Silver Creek. Young women would seek out Rebecca's books. Young men would ask Marcus how he'd known, how he'd understood that a woman's past could be her greatest strength. And the answer was always the same. I looked at the woman before me, not at the illusion society wanted me to believe. And in that moment, when she let the cloth drop, when she stood completely herself, I understood that this authentic, lived, complicated, honest woman was exactly what I'd been searching for my entire life. Years after they both passed away, their letters were published, and a new generation discovered the story of two people who'd chosen each other not despite their imperfection, but because of it. The image that resonated most powerfully was that moment, her standing before him, cloth dropped, nothing between them but truth, and his heart stilling in recognition of what it meant to truly see another person. It was a story about surrender and acceptance. It was a story about a man who'd learned that the purest love isn't found in untouched innocence, but in the willingness to love someone completely, knowing their full story, their full history, their complete and complicated self.